From his position at the point of the Armada, Prince Humperdinck stared up at the cliffs of insanity. This was just like any other hunt. He made himself think away the quarry. It did not matter if you were after an antelope or a bride-to-be. The procedures held. You gathered evidence, then you acted. You studied, then you performed. If you studied too little, the chances were strong that your actions would also be too late. You had to take time. And so, frozen in thought, he continued to stare up the sheer face of the cliffs. Obviously, someone had recently climbed them. There were foot scratchings all the way up a straight line, which meant most certainly a rope, an arm-over-arm climb up a 1,000-foot rope with occasional foot kicks for balance. To make such a climb required both strength and planning, so the prince made those marks in his brain. My enemy is strong, my enemy is not impulsive. Now his eyes reached a point perhaps 300 feet from the top. Here it began to get interesting. Now, the foot scratchings were deeper, more frequent, and they followed no direct ascending line. Either someone left the rope 300 feet from the top intentionally, which made no sense, or the rope was cut while that someone was still 300 feet from safety. For clearly, this last part of the climb was made of the rock face itself. But who had such talent? And why had he been called to exercise it at such a deadly time, 700 feet above disaster? I must examine the tops of the cliffs of insanity, the prince said, without bothering to turn. From behind him, Count Rugen only said, "Done," and awaited further instructions. Send half the Armada south along the coastline, the other north. They should meet by twilight near the fire swamp. Our ship will sail to the first landing possibility, and you will follow me with your soldiers. Ready the whites. Count Rugen signaled the cannoneer, and the prince's instructions boomed along the cliffs. Within minutes, the Armada had begun to split, with only the prince's giant ship sailing alone closest to the coastline, looking for a landing possibility. There, the prince ordered some time later, and the ship began maneuvering into the cove for a safe place to anchor. That took time, but not much, because the captain was skilled and, more than that, the prince was quick to lose patience, and no one dared risk that. Humperdinck jumped from ship to shore, a plank was lowered, and the whites were led to ground. Of all his accomplishments, none pleased the prince as did these horses. Someday he would have an army of them, but getting the bloodlines perfect was a slow business. He now had 4 whites, and they were identical. Snowy, tireless giants, 20 hands high. On flat land, nothing could catch them, and even on hills and rocky terrain, there was nothing short of Araby close to their equal. The prince, when rushed, rode all 4 bareback, the only way he ever rode, riding 1, leading 3, changing beasts in mid-stride, so that no single animal had to bear its bulk to the tiring point. Now he mounted and was gone. It took him considerably less than an hour to reach the edge of the cliffs of insanity. He dismounted, went to his knees, commenced his study of the terrain. There had been a rope tied around a giant oak. The bark of the base was broken and scraped, so probably whoever first reached the top untied the rope, and whoever was on the rope at that moment was 300 feet from the peak and somehow survived the climb. A great jumble of footprints caused him trouble. It was hard to ascertain what had gone on. Perhaps a conference, because 2 sets of footprints seemed to lead off, while one remained pacing the cliff edge. Then there were 2 in the cliff edge. Humperdinck examined the prince until he was certain of 2 things. 1, a fencing match had taken place. 2, the combatants were both masters. The stride length, the quickness of the foot feints, all clearly revealed to his unfailing eye, made him reassess his second conclusion. They were at least masters, probably better. Then he closed his eyes and concentrated on smelling out the blood. Surely, in a match of such ferocity, blood must have been spilled. Now it was a matter of giving his entire body over to a sense of smell. The prince had worked at this for many years, ever since a wounded tigress had surprised him from a tree limb while he was tracking her. He had let his eyes follow the blood hunt then, and it almost killed him. Now he trusted only his olfactories. If there was blood within 100 yards, he would find it. He opened his eyes, moved without hesitation toward a group of large boulders until he found the blood drops. There were few of them, and they were dry, but less than 3 hours old. Humperdinck smiled. When you had the whites under you, 3 hours was a finger snap. He retraced the duel then, for it confused him. It seemed to range from cliff edge and back, then returned to the cliff edge. And sometimes the left foot seemed to be leading, sometimes the right, which made no logical sense at all. Clearly, swordsmen were changing hands, but why would a master do that unless his good arm was wounded to the point of uselessness? And that clearly had not happened, because the wound of that death would have left blood spores, and there was simply not enough blood in the area to indicate that. Strange. Humperdinck continued his wanderings. Strange still, the battle could not have ended in death. He knelt by the outline of a body. Clearly, a man had lain unconscious here, but again, no blood. There was a mighty duel, Prince Humperdinck said, directing his comment toward Count Rugen, who had finally caught up, together with a contingent of 100 mounted men-at-arms. My guess would be, and for a moment the prince paused, following footsteps, would be that whoever fell here ran off there, and he pointed one way, and that whoever was the victor ran off along the mountain path in almost precisely the opposite direction. It is almost my opinion that the victor was following the path taken by the princess. Shall we follow them both? The count asked. I think not, Prince Humperdinck replied. Whoever is gone is of minimal importance, since whoever had the princess is the whoever we're after. And because we don't know the nature of the trap we might be being led into, we need all the arms we have in one band. Clearly, this has been planned by countrymen of Guilder, and nothing must ever be put past them. You think this is a trap, then? The count asked. I always think everything is a trap until proven otherwise, the prince answered, which is why I'm still alive. And with that, he was back aboard a white and galloping. When he reached the mountain path where the hand fight had happened, the prince did not even bother dismounting. Everything that could be seen was quite visible from horseback. Someone has beaten a giant, he said, when the count was close enough. The giant has run away, do you see? The count, of course, saw nothing but rock and mountain path. I would not think to doubt you. And look there, cried the prince, because now he saw for the first time, in the rubble of the mountain path, the footsteps of a woman. The princess is alive! And again the whites were thundering across the mountain. When the count caught up with him again, the prince was kneeling over the still body of a hunchback. The count dismounted. Smell this, the prince said, and he handed up a goblet. Nothing, the count said. No odor at all. Iocane, the prince replied. I would bet my life on it. I know of nothing else that kills so silently. He stood up then. The princess was still alive. Her footprints followed the path. He shouted at the 100 mounted men, there will be great suffering in Guilder if she dies. On foot now, he ran along the mountain path, following the footsteps that he alone could see. And when those footsteps left the path for a wilder terrain, he followed still. Strung out behind him, the count and all the soldiers did their best to keep up. Men stumbled, horses fell, even the count tripped from time to time. Prince Humperdinck never even broke stride. He ran steadily, mechanically, his bare legs pumping like a metronome. It was 2 hours after dawn when he reached the steep ravine. Odd, he said to the count, who was tiring badly. The count continued only to breathe deeply. 2 bodies fell to the bottom, and they did not come back up. That is odd, the count managed. No, that isn't what's odd, the prince corrected. Clearly, the kidnapper did not come back up because the climb was too steep, and our cannons must have let him know that they were closely pursued. His decision, which I applaud, was to make better time running along the ravine floor. The count waited for the prince to continue. It's just odd that a man who was a master fencer, a defeater of giants, an expert in the use of iocane powder, would not know what this ravine opens into. And what is that? Asked the count. The fire swamp, said Prince Humperdinck. Then we have him, said the count. Precisely so. It was a well-documented trait of his to smile, only just before the kill. His smile was very much in evidence now. Westley, indeed, had not the least idea that he was racing dead into the fire swamp. He knew only Once but Buttercup was down at the ravine bottom beside him, that to climb out would take, as Prince Humperdinck had assumed, too much time. Westley noted only that the ravine bottom was flat rock and heading in the general direction he wanted to follow. So he and Buttercup fled along, both of them very much aware that gigantic forces were following them and undoubtedly cutting into their lead. The ravine grew increasingly sheer as they went along, and Westley soon realized that whereas once he probably could have helped her through the climb, now there was simply no way of doing so. He had made his choice, and there was no changing possible. Wherever the ravine led was their destination, and that, quite simply, was that. At this point in the story, my wife wants it known that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her: this is me, and I'm not trying to be confusing, but the above paragraph that I'm cutting into now is verbatim Morgenstern, who was continually referring to his wife in the unabridged book, saying that she loved the next section, or she thought that, all in all, the book was extraordinarily brilliant. Mrs. Morgenstern was rarely anything but supportive to her husband, unlike some wives I could mention. Sorry about that, Helen, but here's the thing. I got rid of almost all the intrusions when he told us what she thought. I didn't think the device added a whole lot, and besides, he was always complimenting himself through her, and today we know that hyping something too much does more harm than good, as any defeated political candidate will tell you when he pays his television bills. The thing of it is, I left this particular reference in because, for once, I totally happened to agree with Mrs. Morgenstern. I think it was unfair not to show the reunion, so I wrote one of my own, what I felt Buttercup and Westley might have said, but Hiram, my editor, felt that made me just as unfair as Morgenstern here. If you're going to abridge a book in the author's own words, you can't go around sticking your own in. That was Hiram's point, and we really went round and round, arguing over, I guess, a period of a month in person through letters on the phone. Finally, we compromised to this extent. This, what you're reading in the regular type, is strict Morgenstern, verbatim. Cut, yes. Change, no. But I got Hiram to agree that Houghton Mifflin Harcourt would at least print out my scene. Ballantine has agreed to do the same, and now that Biss is back with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, they've taken it up again too. It's all of 3 pages. Big deal. And if any of you want to see what it came out like, drop a note or a postcard to Jelinka Harvey at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, 222 Berkeley Street, Boston, and just mention you like the reunion scene. Don't forget to include your return address. You'd be stunned at how many people send in for things and don't put their return address down. The publishers agreed to spring for the postage costs, so your total expense is the note or card or whatever. It would really upset me if I turned out to be the only modern American writer who gave the impression that he was with a generous publishing house. They all stink. Sorry about that, Mr. Jovanovich. So let me just add here that the reason they are so generous in paying this giant postage bill is because they fully expect nobody to write in. So please, if you have the least interest at all, or even if you don't, write in for my reunion scene. You don't have to read it. I'm not asking that, but I would love to cost those publishing geniuses a few dollars because, let's face it, they're not spending much on advertising my books. Let me just repeat the address for you, zip code and all. Jelinka Harvey, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, 222 Berkeley Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02116. And just ask for your copy of the reunion scene. This has gone longer than I planned, so I'm going to repeat the Morgenstern paragraph I interrupted. It'll read better. Over and out. At this point in the story, my wife wants it known that she feels violently cheated, not being allowed the scene of reconciliation on the ravine floor between the lovers. My reply to her is simply this. A, each of God's beings, from the lowliest on up, is entitled to at least a few moments of genuine privacy. B, what actually was spoken, while moving enough to those involved at the actual time, flattens like toothpaste when transferred to paper for later reading. My dove, my only, bliss, bliss, etc. See, nothing of importance in an expository way was related, because every time Buttercup began, tell me about yourself, Westley quickly cut her off with, later, beloved, now is not the time. I've been writing since Eisenhower's been president, and I think this is my first asterisk. I feel giddy. The purpose of this is to announce that time has marched on. If you don't want to wait to read the reunion scene, you no longer have to. Just go to the internet and log on to www.princessbridebook.com. You'll see it right on your very own computer screen. However, it should be noted, in fairness to all, that 1. He did weep, 2. Her eyes did not remain precisely dry, 3. There was more than one embrace, and 4. Both parties admitted that, without any qualifications whatsoever, they were more than a little glad to see each other. Besides, 5. Within a quarter of an hour, they were arguing. It began quite innocently, the two of them kneeling, facing each other, Westley holding her perfect face in his quick hands. When I left you, he whispered, you were already more beautiful than anything I dared to dream. In our years apart, my imaginings did their best to improve on your perfection. At night, your face was forever behind my eyes. And now I see that the vision who kept me company in my loneliness was a hag compared to the beauty now before me. Enough about my beauty, Buttercup said. Everybody always talks about how beautiful I am. I've got a mind, Westley. Talk about that. Throughout eternity, I shall do that very thing, he told her. But now we haven't time. He made it to his feet. The ravine fall had shaken and battered him, but all his bones survived the trip uncracked. He helped her to her feet. Westley, Buttercup said then, just before I started down after you, while I was still up there, I could hear you saying something, but the words were indistinct. I've forgotten whatever it was. Terrible liar. He smiled at her and kissed her cheek. It's not important, believe me. The past has a way of being past. We must not begin with secrets from each other. She meant it. He could tell that. Trust me, he tried. I do. So tell me your words, or I shall be given reason not to. Westley sighed. What I was trying to get through to you, beloved sweet, what I was, as a matter of accurate fact, shouting with everything I had left was, whatever you do, stay up there. Don't come down here, please. You didn't want to see me. Of course I wanted to see you. I just didn't want to see you down there, down here. Why ever not? Because now, my precious, we're more or less kind of trapped. I can't climb out of here and bring you with me without it taking all day. I can get out myself, most likely, without it taking all day, but with the addition of your lovely bulk, it's not about to happen. Nonsense. You climb the cliffs of insanity, and this isn't nearly that steep. And it took a little out of me too, let me tell you. And after that little effort, I tangled with a fellow who knew a little something about fencing. And after that, I spent a few happy moments grappling with a giant. And after that, I had to outfake a Sicilian to death when any mistake meant it was a knife in the throat for you. And after that, I've run my lungs out a couple of hours. And after that, I was pushed 200 feet down a rock ravine. I'm tired, Buttercup. Do you understand tired? I put in a night is what I'm trying to get through to you. I'm not stupid, you know. Quit bragging. Stop being rude. When was the last time you read a book? The truth now. And picture books don't count. I mean something with print in it. Buttercup walked away from him. There's other things to read than print, she said, and the Princess of Hammersmith is displeased with you and is thinking seriously of going home. With no more words, she whirled into his arms then, saying, Oh, Westley, I didn't mean that. I didn't. Not a single syllable of it. Now, Westley knew that she meant to say not a single syllable of it, because a syllable was something you ate with cream and wine mixed in together to form the base. But he also knew an apology when he heard one, so he held her very close and shut his loving eyes and only whispered, I knew it was false, believe me, every single syllable. And that out of the way, they started running as fast as they could along the flat rock floor of the ravine.